Welcome, Tucker Bilodeau. You are about to be a part of an amazing experience which you will absolutely not regret in your entire life.
I'm sure.
So, I've already said your name, but just for the official record, if you could please state your name, what you teach, and what school you work at.
My name is Tucker Bilodeau. I teach choir and AP Music Theory at Newman Smith High School.
Awesome. How many years have you been teaching?
This is my 5th year.
5th year. And what ages of students have you taught in your teaching career so far?
I have taught high school, so 9th through 12th grade. What is that, like ages 14 to 18?
Gotcha. I love the specificity. So, now, this might be a little bit of a lengthy response, but how did you get into teaching?
Good question. So originally, I think my first goal in high school was I wanted to be a doctor because I took a lot of science classes. It was like, this is dope. And then I took a doctor, became engineer because I enjoyed the physics side of science more. And then I took a job tutoring kids in a bunch of different subjects and really enjoyed it. So that's the first time I started thinking about teaching. And then the only question I had to answer was what do I want to teach? Well, I could totally go teach math or science because I was super invested in, like I said, physics. But I made the Texas All-State Choir as a junior and a senior. And I think it was the experience I had senior year was what solidified teaching music. I started thinking about it junior year because it was a great experience, but senior year is when I was like, nope, I'm going to school for music education.
Wow. It's really interesting seeing how different teachers have totally different processes into how they ended up here. Because obviously there are some people who, as a teenager, they're like, man, I really want to be with kids. I'm going to go teach 2nd grade or something like that. And then, but I would say that overall, people who end up teaching in higher education, whether it's in post-secondary or in high school, would you agree that most of the time they have to be invested in a specific subject rather than having an overall interest in teaching?
I think so. Obviously, the interest in teaching helps because there are days where it's just like, oh my God, what's happening right now? And knowing that you're invested in what you're doing, regardless of the subject, kind of helps you get through that. But the kind of to piggyback off of what you said, I have found that and even in myself, I am less interested in the age of kid, I'm going to use kid, but student that I have, and more interested in helping them. Part of to go back to my previous answers, part of making the All-State Choir, I kind of figured out how I learn and how I process information, and was able to apply that to everything else and have a lot of fun in high school because of that. And so my goal when I said I want to teach music was less, I want to be with kids and teach kids. It was more, I want to help someone find themselves through music. But it's two sides of the same coin because I think definitely in the younger, the elementary teachers, you find a lot of those teachers are specifically I want to help kids, I want to help kids, I want to help kids, and they can do that through teaching all the different subjects that you do in an elementary classroom or the high school and especially college. It's less of I want to help kids and just I want to help people.
Yeah, I think that distinction definitely makes a big difference because certainly whenever you're closer in age to the people you're teaching, like it usually is in high school and college, it's really more of coming alongside rather than being in direct supervision over.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's my favorite thing about teaching high school is that exactly is my job is to not be the ivory tower of knowledge that is.
which you could very well do, given
Sure.
all the 5s you got on your AP tests.
Sure. But I much rather enjoy the, it's not like, I don't want to use the word collaborative because it's a little bit different, teacher and student, but it almost is collaborative and like, okay, here's a thing and we're going to go through this together, even though like my job is to help guide you through it instead of just, like vomit lecture at you.
Which some students find that vomit of lecture the most beneficial as far as their knowledge is concerned. But it also does bring up some problems for other students who lack that attention. We could get all into the psychology of all that, but we're going to stay away from that just for the sake of this interview.
For the sake of time.
Yes.
We'll be here until next Tuesday.
Was there ever a time when you thought that you were going to stop teaching and pursue something else? Now, obviously, you haven't been teaching as long as some of the other teachers I might be interviewing for this podcast, but 5 years is certainly enough to have maybe some glimpses of that.
Honestly, I think honestly the first time that I've thought about quitting teaching has been this year during COVID. Just because it's a little bit different for like the music theory class because that's largely a lecture-based class and it's I don't want to say not interactive, but it's not as immediate as like being in front of a band choir orchestra is. And part of the reason I enjoyed the choir stuff is because you get the immediate feedback of, oh yeah, the students have grasped something that I said, or oh, they figured out X, Y, and Z, and I can hear that. Doing this whole half in person, half online, which is really more like 20% in person, 80% online, is absolutely mind-numbing from the ensemble perspective. Talked to a bunch of other teachers that also teach choir and other fine arts, and it's just like once, like we don't think about it, but we rely on the instant feedback of being in front of an ensemble, and when you don't get that, there's like all of the creeping doubt of just like, why am I doing this? Like, what, I'm literally killing myself trying to make something happen that I have no idea if it's actually going to happen. This year's been rough to say the least in that sense. I can say for me that there have been, before this year, there were very few days where I walked out of wherever I was working and just been kind of downtrodden with like, what, I don't know what I accomplished today. But this year it's been a lot of like, I think I did the best I could. I have no idea. And that's extraordinarily disconcerting, but
I think it's really interesting how a lot of times we can be more self-conscious when there are fewer people right in front of us to give us feedback. You would think that it'd be the other way around. Like, okay, I have a 50-person ensemble in front of me, so what I say and what I do, it's going to be a lot more amplified. And yet, when it's just you and 3 other kids sitting on a couch in your office, it's like, wow, this is really real, and this is like, is it good? Is it not as effective?
No, I think it's good. I think sometimes for context, and when Jacob's in my music theory class, sometimes there are only 2 or 3 people here, in person and the rest are online. And it's easier and I think more relaxed to just chill out on my couch in the office as like we're doing everything than to be in the more formal setting of a classroom, because there's so few of us in person, but we can still get the same amount of stuff done that we would in a traditional sense. And I enjoy and I thrive in the more relaxed environments. So like even in an ensemble setting, I don't like to be the kind of director that's like, we have to work all the time and like we have to get this done, we have to get this done, we have to get this done. I much prefer the sense of, here's what I want to get done, let's see what happens and go from there. So immediately the whole environment is way more relaxed than just, I have to get this stuff done. And that helps me keep my brain straight.
Sure.
Because outside of, this is related but not, outside of school, I sing professionally around DFW, and a lot of the time it's like, you might have 12 total hours of rehearsal before a concert. Like I just did one last week that was 3 2.5 hour rehearsals, an hour dress rehearsal, and then we had a recording session for a set of music. And it like that's the part where like you got to get stuff done, so everybody's kind of super intense, and the atmosphere is high intensity, and by the end of it you're just mentally and emotionally exhausted because you've been in that environment for a couple hours, and that's the kind of thing that I don't necessarily like to bring to
the
classroom. Although there are some times where you have to.
Yeah, sure.
But I also find that it helps the learning, because it's like the tricks of the trade, I guess, or the best kind of learning happens when they don't realize that learning is happening. So if I can convey information in a slightly interesting way without a lot of pressure, it's more likely to be recalled later. That wasn't necessarily the case yesterday in class, but whatever.
Well, not every day is going to be perfect.
Right.
So, yeah, you mentioned like how you kind of have the control about like how much to the degree is it going to be, we got to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
So as a teacher, you obviously have the freedom to have a certain level of enforcement. So what would you say is the best way to motivate students who clearly are not as bought into whatever they're learning?
The tricky part of that is that there's no one answer. What I found works for me, for the most part, and there's like anyone that tells you that they can get 100% of kids to buy in 100% of the time is not being genuine. That's just not going to happen. For me, I have found that I've been able to get between like 85-90% of kids to buy in by just being a real human. It doesn't necessarily matter what I'm teaching. If the students can see that I am human and that I'm, in the trenches with them, as it were, instead of, like I said, the ivory tower of knowledge being rained down upon you. I have found that one helps create better relationships, better classroom environment, and even if they're not immediately bought into the subject, they can kind of ease into that because of the classroom environment, where it's like, oh, I want to go to this person's class because we have fun in there, even if they don't go, oh, I want to go to this person's class because I love music theory or whatever. That's my approach. Doesn't work for everybody. but I found that works for my personality. Some other people have the super high intensity, super high energy all the time, like essentially cheerleading effect, and that gets kids involved, but that doesn't work for me. That is not my personality.
Well, and like you said, there isn't one answer, because as a student, I've experienced some classes that I like because I like the subject, some classes that I like because I have friends in that class, some classes because I like the teacher, and so it can be this big gradient of things. And the tricky part is, as a teacher, I'm assuming, is that you don't have much control over any of those factors.
The only... Correct. Like, I honestly have, as a teacher, have no control over the perception of me in my classroom. I can only try to influence it by, like I said, having the almost more collaborative environment that is more relaxed, and setting up a atmosphere that students want to be in, as opposed to, oh my god, I have to go to math or whatever. I know as teachers we try to control it as much as possible, and there are plenty of other teachers that will tell you, yes, I do this, and this, and under the umbrella of classroom management. And there are obviously certain things, like in an ensemble setting, it's obviously much better to be, fully planned out with structure, like a full class period structure, and like that they're gonna do this, and this in a day, and that the only thing that really changes is like what you might rehearse in a piece of music or something like that. Whereas in a class that could be super boring just because it's largely lecture-like theory, it's way more fun for me, and I think way more fun for y'all when I'm not up here going, and this is a 4-chord, and this is how you use a 4-chord. And it's like, no, just write with it, see what happens.
Yeah. So I mean, I have obviously a ton of things that I could ask you.
Sure.
But we're going to skip forward a little bit into this, kind of going along with what you were just talking about with students' perception, that kind of thing. But if your students had to describe you in 3 words, which do you think they would use?
I think they would say I'm fair. I think they would say I'm honest. I want it, like, happy's not really the thing I'm going for, but like, I'd say fair, honest, and probably relaxed.
Relaxed. Well, as one of your students, I would not necessarily use those exact words, but I think that's a fair, a just description. And obviously it's going to depend on which student you're asking.
Right.
So most of the answers to these questions are going to be broad generalizations, because obviously we would have to make this a very long endeavor. We're trying to describe the experience of every student who's ever stepped into your classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, if you could change one thing about the American public schooling system, what would you change?
One thing. I kind of have 2 answers to this. One of them is my music teacher answer, and one of them is just teaching in general. So if we're just thinking as a music teacher, arts should be mandatory outside of the 1 year credit that you typically need,
which they're trying to get rid of now.
Which is beyond sad, because there's all the scientific evidence of kids involved in the arts have better test scores and yada yada, all that kind of stuff, and that's all good and true. But I have found that kids having an outlet for anything, whether it's arts, sports, academics to some extent, just are, almost want to say like they're better people all around, even though it's not like you're a better person than a football player.
I mean, there's not really a metric.
Right. But it's it seems like they're more content. The students that are involved in some kind of art are more content with their schooling experience, which kind of helps influence how they think about other stuff. My teaching as a whole answer is I would want somebody, doesn't matter if it's state government or federal government, to be like, this is how we're going to have classes every day, be it 8 periods or block, AB block kind of stuff, or modified block or whatever. Like, someone needs to like just say, no, this is how high school classes are going to be everywhere. That way there's a lot more equity, no matter where you would go, because everybody's got roughly the same amount of time to spend on every subject that is taught, instead of just moving from district to district, state to state. Everybody's different. Like, I know there are districts that have 4-day class days, and they go to class for a couple hours longer each day to make up for the fact that they don't have a 5th class day. But just everybody feels better about everything because there's one less day to worry about. So I would want some kind of uniformity across scheduling everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of scheduling in general. The calendar is something that we as humans have really dug ourselves into a hole in, because it does not make a whole lot of sense for really get down to the nitty gritty.
No, I live and die by my calendar, and with singing professionally and other like conducting stuff and teaching and all this kind of stuff. Teaching comes first because it's my main job, but there's so much what I like to call calendar poker, just trying to figure everything out where it all fits.
Sure. That's a good answer. I like that.
Thank you.
All right. So, if you had to eliminate every single course from high school except 3, which 3 would you choose to keep in order for students to be most prepared for the real world after high school?
We're talking like broad subjects, right? Not like
It could
English
be.
4.
It could be specific. I mean, sure, you can be as specific or as
Yeah.
vague as you want, and it doesn't have to be necessarily something that exists right now.
Mhm.
Because if we're cutting it down that much, you might have to
Mhm.
be a little fancy with this hypothetical.
Right. 3 classes. One of those would have to be music of some kind. Because we can't all just sit and listen to someone talk every day. Another one would probably be, I don't know what you'd call it, but like just English in general. Reading, writing, how to, formulate sentences, and how to write emails, and how to write a resume. That kind of, like, just writing in general is deceptively important. And like, I know for myself, I went to school in Texas and everything, and I don't think I got legit, like what I would call legitimate writing training, as in like writing training outside of something like an AP exam,
Sure.
until grad school. That's a long time to like figure out how to write an essay or something like that. Because it makes you a better communicator on a whole when you can think like that. And then the third one, it would probably be some kind of math course, but it would involve like the basic like algebra, arithmetic kind of stuff, and then like in there would be some finance education and that kind of stuff.
Clever.
But yeah, so in a broad sense, music, English, and math is what I'd say.
All right. Reading, arithmetic, and rhythm. Up in the ante here.
Spoken like a true ancient Greek.
Absolutely. Okay. We are coming to a close here. But I have an interesting quote to share with you.
Okay.
And if you would just, as soon as you hear this, kind of just spout out the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
George Bernard Shaw once said, "Those who can do, those who can't teach."
BS. That's absolutely false. That I can understand the perception behind it, because like for instance in the singer world, if you're a good enough singer, you can be on the Met stage versus teaching choir in high school. That's always been a mentality, especially around music stuff. I am of the opinion that if the teachers themselves are not experts in their content or use of their content, they shouldn't be teaching. And that's kind of a failing in like, especially the Texas system of certification is like, I am certified as a teacher in Texas to teach all levels of music of any kind, from early childhood through 12th grade. Technically, I am certified to go walk down to the band room and be a band director.
Start waving your hands around. Okay.
And I know I could wave my hands around confidently, but there would be I am not an expert in how those instruments work, what kinds of technical challenges kids face playing those instruments, and even picking music for those instruments. I can fake my way through it enough to learn it, because I know I learn best by literally being thrown in the fire and just saying, okay, go. But if I think that if the teachers themselves are not content experts, they're doing the kids a disservice, because what they tend to do is teach strictly by a textbook or strictly by some kind of prescribed curriculum, and not growing outside of that. So there's no, like, 2 + 2 is 4. Okay, well, that's fine. And if the textbook or whatever tells you that 2 + 2 is 4, then 2 + 2 is 4. But why is that really? That's always the question that I ask. It's not just, okay, 2 + 2 is 4. Why? And those kinds of why questions can't necessarily be answered by someone who's not a content expert. The other thing in general is that, and again, this is kind of more specific to music, I think, people who can perform at an extremely high level,
Like cognitively? Or musically?
Yeah, both, actually, can't always figure out how to break down how they do it to convey it as a teacher. I know when I first started teaching, like end of undergrad, going into looking for jobs and stuff, like I know that I had a problem of having the lofty goal and not necessarily knowing how to break down that goal in smaller technical type chunks to bring someone else to that goal. I feel like I'm way better about that now than I used to be, but that takes one, not just knowing what I'm teaching, music, excuse me, but also knowing how I can apply that to the, I guess the right word would be like science of teaching or whatever, to know that, you know, in order to perform a piece of music, you have to be able to play these notes and these rhythms and that kind of, and break it down all the way, instead of just kind of vomiting information.
Well, that about sums it up for that topic. I obviously do not agree with that quote either.
Sure.
It's just very unprofessional.
I feel like maybe, like, I'm 30 right now. I feel like 15 years ago when I was in high school, way more people agreed with that quote than people I know now.
Well, sure. I mean, a lot of students don't particularly like most of their classes, and so they're much more likely to have that view as far as who their teachers are and what their motivations are.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm sure your motivation to get up each morning and come to work, very few times do you think about, oh, I need to prove that I know everything about choir.
Yeah, no. I mean, I personally am of the opinion that if you want to know what I know, and I haven't necessarily shown you what I know, ask me. Most of the time, no, not most of the time, about half the time, there's not a reason for me to show you what I know, because what I know will do nothing but mess up what you know, because you don't know as much as I do, if that makes sense. And I don't want to overload you with information to screw up what we might be doing in class that day.
Sure.
Like, you've heard me do that in theory. Like, oh, you don't necessarily need to know X, Y, or Z. Like, this isn't on the AP exam, but it's a real thing in music. Kind of analysis, I guess.
And there are lots of times like that when there's a delicate balance that you have to protect in order for your students to truly be benefited.
Like, I want you to know these quote-unquote extra things, but if you're already struggling with the quote basic things that the test covers, the extra things aren't necessarily going to do anything for you. I found that a couple times, like, rarely will knowing something that's not pertinent to what is currently being learned or whatever provides more clarity. But in that case, I found that those kids aren't as uncomfortable with the basic material. They're more they're curious, and they're more uncomfortable with not knowing. And it doesn't matter what the content is at that point.
Because that's more of like a character trait at that point.
Yeah.
And I think
And that'll drive them through.
Yes, definitely. And for music theory, it's a little bit different because all the students in music theory chose to be in this course. Nobody was thrown in there by chance. So the dynamic is going to be a lot different than English or math or something that they literally have to take because it's mandated by the state. So we could also go into that. I mean, a whole other tangent like that so much. But yeah, coming to a close here, if you could attend a seminar in which any person, living or dead, was speaking about something, who would that person be?
Woof. So I will tell you the immediate struggle I'm having with that question is, do I want it to be something content related, like a composer or conductor kind of thing, or do I want it to be life related?
Because schools should be life related.
Entirely
all the
true.
time.
Entirely true. That's why you need to know what your 5/7 chords are. I think I would. No, you know what? I want a seminar on just his approach to life in general and how he does comedy. I want Dave Chappelle to just like have a seminar on like how he does things and what happens if something goes horribly wrong while he's performing. Because even though teaching music theory isn't performing, in a sense it is, because as a teacher you kind of got to be on your game for the kids. And I would be interested to see how like what I do as a teacher and singer relates to what Chappelle does in being a stand-up comedian.
Gotta tell you, I was kind of scratching my head at how you're gonna make that connection at first. But that is certainly an intriguing answer.
I'm glad I could be intriguing.
For sure. Well, I'm not really sure what you expected coming into this interview, because I'm certainly behaving a little bit differently right now than I normally do in your class.
No, what? No.
We don't really need to go into any more detail about that at this moment, but I am very grateful that you took some time out of your day to be here with me and to help me out with this project.
Absolutely.
I didn't really go into much detail about
what is it?
What I'm doing, so I guess I can say that.
Who did I just give my life away to?
Oh, you don't want to know.
Okay, well.
Well, basically, I have been in the science and engineering pathway here at Smith, and they've had some faculty changes, just to put it lightly. And so this year we have Mr. Lees, who has a background in chemistry and science, but he came into an engineering job that he really has no experience in. But he's doing his best to make sure that we are getting the real life experience that we need. This senior class is called career preparation, and there is absolutely no curriculum established for it. So,
awesome.
Mr. Lees decided that to benefit us the most, he was going to have us do a capstone project on a career field that interests us. And I struggled a lot at the beginning deciding what career field I wanted to choose, because I've always enjoyed math, but being an accountant or an actuary doesn't really stick out that much to me. But I have enjoyed the few instances where I get to enlighten a classmate on a certain concept or something like that. So I thought that teaching is a viable solution for that issue for me. So at first I was going to make some sort of game that I could use for students to get better at calculus, but I don't really have any experience in game design, not a great coder, and I frankly did not have much motivation to carry out with that. But I do consider myself a bit of a well-spoken individual. I can carry a conversation with someone I do or do not know for an extended period of time. This helps out a lot with that, as there are times when I'm stuck at the end of the line with a guest at Chick-fil-A, and I just got to keep talking, you know? And so I figured that it would be very beneficial both for me learning through talking with other teachers for a while, but also perhaps with other people who might be looking into getting into teaching, but they don't really know where to start. For people who might be a teacher already and they're struggling a little bit, whether it's because of COVID or just some other personal reason. to create a podcast where I can detail the experiences that other teachers have in their path to teaching, various struggles or difficulties they've had, but also the little shining moments in their profession that allow them to keep going and to really kind of see why they're doing what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And so this is my second official interview.
Cool.
So I think it went pretty well.
Why was I not your first? Don't answer that, actually.
I guess there's not really a real reason. But, yeah, so once again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And I
Happy
will
to help.
see you again tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, make sure you do your part writing homework.
Absolutely. I was not here when you assigned that, but I will definitely get that.
You weren't.
Yeah. No, we're good.
I gave you a soprano and bass line that we wrote the melody.
Andrew told me it's okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I
Well,
just wanted to make it clear to the listener that I, as a teacher, am not leaving him out to dry.
okay, this is definitely not going to end up in the podcast.
What? Come on! The B-side?
Yeah. But signing off, this is Jacob Von Tress. Thank you very much.